I'm back. I didn't quite lose it there. Did manage to get it exported as an MP3 file. I also noticed that I didn't have my microphone setting turned all the way up, so this one probably coming in louder. My up and down lines, blue lines, are a lot wider than they were in the last one. But I won't do the last one. You can probably make it out anyway. So here we are. Oops, just turned the page on my Kindle. Number 11, I dragged myself. So this is December 29th still, 97. I dragged myself down the bank with a 50-foot length of green plastic garden hose dragging along behind me, and I began to pace off the beds. I moved slowly. My cough wasn't too bad. I broke some dead twigs that had blown down from the black walnut tree, and I stuck them in the ground to mark the 4 outside corners of my future garden. I stuck more twigs where the gates could be. 3 gates, if I ever got a fence. And more twigs along the sides of the beds. Beds 3 feet wide, yes. Paths 5 feet wide, yes. Plenty wide for the wheelbarrow. I would smother mulch the paths to kill the grass. Yes, good. I climbed back up the bank for a piece of paper and a pen to sketch the garden plan. Blueberries on the hillside, asparagus by the road, raspberries here, strawberries there. At the south end of the garden, I'd have a trellis for Aunt Bew's electric pink morning glories. And I'd have another trellis at the north end for Nadine Boris's midnight blue morning glories. 100 feet apart, so the colors wouldn't cross. I had carried the seeds with me from California. And blueberries, yes, lots of blueberries. A handful of blueberries with the dew still on them, fresh from the bush to the mouth, has the pure taste of summer in them. I'd put in 4 Berkeleys, if I could find them, and 2 blue crop for pollinators. The bare-rooted blueberry plants would be arriving in the garden shops in the middle of February. Middle of February, only 8 weeks away. Not much time to get a garden ready, starting from scratch, for a person who doesn't like to use power equipment. I looked at the sky. I had an hour before the sun would go down behind standing Indian Mountain. My cold was cured. I hustled up the slope to the barn for the rake and the wheelbarrow. There was a pile of old brown pine needles sitting by the back of the house. I heaped them into the barrow, and I wheeled them down the hill and spread them as a deep mulch along my future blueberry bed. Pine needles are acid, and blueberries love an acid soil. My cold was cured. I moved 9 loads of needles that day. The next day, I carried down my long-handled shovel and began to dig out the turf. Number 14, my ramp. I'm sitting in the swinging chair on the back porch, and I'm looking down over the bank to where I've been digging out my new garden. The garden will be 50 feet wide and 100 feet long. My old dream of making a botanical garden in my yard has been tapping softly but persistently against the back door of my mind again. Has been pulling at the screen that separates reason from folly, and is now squeezing itself in. This week, I've been building a dirt ramp from the upper level of the yard where the house is to the lower level where the garden is going to be. I'm making the ramp from the grass sods that I'm digging out of my future blueberry beds. At present, the ramp is only wide enough for the tire of the wheelbarrow, but I'm just getting started, and I'm going gung-ho. I push the loaded wheelbarrow up the steep ramp, and I go down with it empty. Don't you think there is something extraordinary about a person who builds a dirt ramp as a form of amusement? I mean, something laudable? I mean, that such a person isn't necessarily some kind of a nut. Okay, next one is called She Woman. Oh, this was, I remember Carrie. I wrote this on January 23rd, 98. My friend, Carrie Grigsby, was once camping in Southern California, alone. Weary from walking, she sat on a dry dirt bank at the edge of an old trail. A flock of tiny birds, titmice maybe, flew to her from across the way, fluttered around her, and made alarm cries. Come, flew back. Carrie followed the birds. She spotted a nest in a low shrub, saw nestlings inside, saw a big old western rattler snaking its way up a crack in a boulder below the nest. What did my friend Carrie do? She pinned the rattler against the rock with a forked stick, and she cut off its head with her hunting knife. Yes, she did. Buried the head and left the thick, patterned body twining in the dust. That's what I call she-woman. This one is called Sleeper in the Snow. It's about my neighbor again, my old neighbor. January 28th, 98. We had a snow not long ago, a real one. Stayed a week. When I walked out with Martha Hannah, I saw ice along the banks of our little Cartugajade Creek. Martha slipped and fell. She said, I hope old Grandpa stays at home today. But no, old Carl Turnquist does his mile a day in the sunshine and the drizzle and the downpour and the snow. On that same stormy day, the wind was blowing strong, and I guess that, on his way up from the bridge, Carl's mile was feeling long. There's a tiny church along our road, St. John's Episcopal. We're the next place to the west. The trees grow close around the graveyard, and the giant rhododendrons make a sheltered nest. Old Carl shuffled in there and laid his old bones down to have a rest. His daughter Jackie found him. She thought that he was gone. She felt his skin and it was cold. She shook him. He slept on. We're only up to 8 minutes, but I got a frog in my throat, so I'll stop here. Story's not over yet. This button right here.